Hi, folks. My name is Gerdes. I'm just a professor trying to help you understand some context in the war in Ukraine. Every week, I provide a um, overview of the previous week's articles. Now, I do this in my three big stories, but there are stories that I have to leave out just because there's so many. This was kind of a slow week, but as far as militarily and even politically, it was kind of a slow week, but there's still stories that you need to understand. Okay, so I'm going to read you the headlines and then periodically I'll stop and either quote from the article or give you some extra background about it. Okay, so the first one, Russian officers in occupied Ukraine had a very bad week, courtesy of Kyiv's partisans. And so what happened was three Russian officers were blown up, and there's more of this kind of thing happening. This was, I think, in Mariupol, and more will be happening in the future because you're oppressing, you're holding them under the thumb. They're going to fight back in whatever way they have. Second article, MP Dubinsky notified a suspicion of high treason for the information and subversive activities for Russia's benefit. I don't think this was just corruption trying to get money. He was actually trying to help the Russians. He might have been paid for it as well, but it was like treasonous, and that's what it appears to be. Military training efforts for Ukraine hit major milestones even as attention shifts to Gaza. So the Brits have trained 30,000 Ukrainians to some NATO standard. The Americans have done 18 or so thousand, and so on and so forth in different countries. So this is NATO training, but it's not. So they follow NATO doctrine. So it's they are having a hard time on the front lines because NATO doctrine would be overwhelming air superiority and overwhelming firepower and that kind of thing, and they can't necessarily do that. But they're far better trained than their Russian conscript counterparts. Okay, Hungary reiterates a block on distributing or dispersing military aid tranche to Ukraine. Hungary's the gadfly. They've been joined recently by Slovakia, but join the EU? No, 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 slow down. Join NATO? No, 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 we don't want that. So Hungary's being a pest. Berlin steps up. Uncle Sam is still Ukraine's biggest supporter, but Germany is closing in. Okay, so Germany is actually starting to take a leadership role in Europe. The UK has been doing a good job with this, but really all of Europe needs to step up and in a big way, and Germany is starting to do that. Germany's support for Ukraine is to be massively expanded next year, according to AP News. The last one was in the Kyiv Post. And good, I'm glad to see that Germany is going to be taking a greater lead role inside Avdiivka's battle against Russian encirclement, and that's still going on. I don't understand why the Russians are doing it. It's not the same casualty rate as it was within the last 2 weeks, but it's still going on. RT, pro-Trump shaman to run for U.S. Congress. Okay, if you remember back to January 6th, the day of the terrible mob violence in the Capitol that gave not only America, but particularly the Republican Party a terrible black eye, this guy was running around with no shirt and some kind of fur outfit and some horns on his head, and he just looked like a ridiculous cosplay kind of figure. He's running for Congress. I can think of very few ways that you can make the Republican Party look worse than to run this guy for Congress. Like, there's got to be some other alternatives in his district. Dmitry Trenin in RT says that the U.S. could have ruled the world, but this one weakness ruined it all, and that is their arrogance, and that is that they didn't bring Russia into a more bipolar, multipolar kind of world, and that's the kind of argument that they make in RT and Pravda. Pravda talks about how Zelensky comes into conflict with his army generals. They really want to play up that narrative. I don't know how much of that is fact or how much of that is just being played up, but they are really trying to make that a thing. The Air Force in Kyiv Independent says that Ukraine adapts Soviet air defense systems to fire U.S. missiles, which is pretty awesome. It's awesome for two reasons. One, they need to adopt NATO standards, generally speaking, and two, it's awesome because they'll be able to fire more missiles when they can get them. Tuesday, November 14th, Ukraine's secret weapon against Russia is controversial U.S. tech company. So this company does facial recognition, and they have identified 100,000 plus Russian soldiers because they do the facial recognition, and then they scan the web, and then they find their social media or whatever, and they find who they are, so they can identify these people. But it could be used for evil, as what's going on in China, where they're kind of locking down the the population using this kind of technology. There was a German journalist on Tuesday. This was in the Guardian. Received 600,000 from a Putin ally. A leak revealed. Now, this was beyond the books. He's receiving this money like shh, don't tell, behind some kind of back door. The publisher didn't know, and he's receiving this. And he says he's an independent journalist. But yeah, how independent are you when you're receiving 600,000 euros from Putin indirectly? The UK sees an incredible acceleration in military capabilities from the Ukrainian war, and they're paying attention and studying that. There's a bridgehead on the Dnipro River. Russia struggles to contain a Ukrainian river crossing, and you're going to see article after article this week. This gives me a lot of hope, this one particular piece of real estate. Putin is eyeing re-election, signs a law allowing voting in occupied Ukraine, because of course it's going to be so much more for him there than anywhere else. So it'll be higher margins there, that's my prediction, than in the rest of the country. Finland is drafting proposals on border crossing restrictions due to illegal migrants from Russia. So they want to get out, and Finland doesn't really want them, but they're trying to get out, and so they have a problem on their border. Okay, Wednesday, 15 November, Zelensky says, I believe relations between Ukraine and Germany will become one of the most reliable pillars, and it probably will, at least in the near term, that's probably going to happen. Ukraine charges officials tied to Hunter Biden probe and Russia. Okay, this is a crazy story. And there's another one with it. I'm going to read the title headline there. Giuliani's Biden sources are charged with being Putin agents. So it appears that whoever Giuliani was dealing with in Ukraine about Hunter Biden, that's the president's son, and whatever nefarious dealings that he was involved in, may have been a Russian source trying to spread false information that Giuliani actually, he was vulnerable to that information because it was what he was looking for. And that's how information works. Like if you're looking for something, you have to test it and push against it rather than just be like, oh, look what I found. For example, if you want to hear that the Ukrainian army, if you're watching this, you're probably pro-Ukraine, and you want to hear that the Ukrainian army did this great big thing, you want to test that and double check and verify it because you're already inclined to believe that. If you want to hear that if you hear that the Russian army did this thing, your tendency will be to minimize that. So Giuliani fell into a very common trap, it appears, and was misled by what appears to be Russian disinformation. Now that doesn't mean that there couldn't be something out there as well, but it looks like there is some kind of disinformation from Russia involved in what was going on there. Okay. Russia admits that Ukraine gained positions on Moscow-held bank of the Dnipro River. Another article about the same thing, and we're going to see more and more over the week. Cyprus confidential revelations should be a spur to action. So here we're talking about independent journalists trying to understand how money is moving behind the scenes in kind of a black market of where money is going and shifting. And it looks like there is something to this, but we can't talk about it just yet. Alleged Russian smuggling network was charged with sending weapons components from the U.S. to Ukraine. I talked about that. I guess it was on Wednesday I talked about that. That was terrible. And these were Russians in the United States sending electronic parts to places like Turkey and other places where then from there it would then be sent to another place or directly to Russia. And then they would use these parts to create missiles that they needed these Western components for. And the FBI has clamped down on that. Ukraine has identified over 180,000 war criminals and created a registry. And they have 100,000 plus war crimes specifically that they have to charge, but they're in the middle of a war, so this has got to have to wait until the war is done. Zelensky proposes to hold a Ukraine-African summit. He's ready to come to any African country. It's good for him to be reaching out to Africa and to South America. He may be making some progress in Argentina now that you have that libertarian president that just came to power in Argentina. But this is good. He needs to be reaching out and countering the Russian outreach to the global South. Taiwanese election could tilt in Beijing's favor. Here, the two opposition parties that are pro-China have kind of decided to work together and in order to get into power. Now, if they come to power, they're going to try to integrate Taiwan more into China. If they lose, then it makes it more likely, if the opposition party stays in place, it makes it more likely that China is going to want to maybe try to take Taiwan by force, but we don't actually know. But the election's coming up in, I think, January. Europe can't keep its promise to Ukraine, defense chief admits. Okay, so for example, Europe has promised a million shells, artillery shells, and they've only provided about 300,000, and they're just not keeping up with what they need to do. And that's what that article is talking about. They need to really step it up. Ukraine established a foothold on the Dnipro River. Yes, we just talked about that. More articles about this over the course of the week. Russia admits that Ukraine gained positions on Moscow-held bank of the Dnipro. So I talked about that in one of my three big stories. Excuse me. I talked about that in one of my three big stories videos, and somebody in the comments was like, well, we already know that they have a foothold. But what's new here, and one of my other viewers corrected this person, said what's new here is that Moscow is admitting it, which they weren't doing before, and that's big. Okay, Thursday, 16 November, the Finance Ministry says that the NBU is ready, National Bank of Ukraine, I think, is ready for a scenario of termination of U.S. financial support, but it may be unpleasant. So they're bracing against this. They hope that it doesn't go that way, but they are trying to prepare themselves for just such an occasion should it come. Okay, David Cameron meets Zelensky and pledges continued UK military support. So David Cameron is the former Prime Minister of Great Britain from quite a few prime ministers back. And he has just been appointed to become the foreign minister and foreign secretary, I think it's called, in the UK. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's the foreign secretary, and he's just continuing on. Say what you will about the British and their conservatives, but their conservatives have been full-throatedly behind Ukraine, and I wish ours were as well. German publisher halts sales of top authors' books after leak reveals the $600,000. So, okay, he's no longer being published, so that's a good thing. Now, he didn't know, like the publisher didn't know that this guy was getting this other money, and that's part of what makes this kind of shady. Okay, Army claims that foothold on the bank of the Dnipro River in the south. Again, daily we're seeing more and more of this, and you're seeing the area that they control expand. This one got my goat, this particular article. South Africa refers Israel to the ICC. Now, it's not because of Israel, but because South Africa watched for 630 days and did nothing about referring Russia to the ICC. But now Israel, now they're going to really, come on, where were you for the last 600 days? Former Russian commander who criticized Putin found dead in mysterious circumstances. Don't want to do that in an authoritarian regime. It doesn't work out so well for you. U.S., and I talked about that in the video. This was a high-ranking general who was found dead. Oh, he was dead in his apartment for a week, or house for a week. They just found him, and then they went back and traced the things that he said about Putin, and it wasn't pleasant. U.S. at a key decision point in support of Ukraine, as top general says that war with Russia is a stalemate. So right now, we're at this weird place where is the U.S. supporting, is it not? Even the media view of what we're seeing in the media about Ukraine has gone down significantly. China brands Biden as irresponsible. Well, he did that because the article said this. This is an RT article. And what happened was Biden meets with Xi in San Francisco for the APEC summit. And then afterwards, a reporter, I guess it's kind of a gotcha moment, says, do you still think that Biden is a dictator? He said, yeah, he's a dictator. Okay, they were just making some progress, and then they just undermined all the progress that they made by saying that. True, he is a dictator, but there should be a way that he could have responded and said, look, we're trying to work on common interests in order to make sure that we have stability in the world or whatever. But okay. South Africa, we already talked about that. Russian artist jailed for 7 years over Ukraine war price tag protest. I talked about this last week as well. So she changed the tags in a grocery store on 5 items from whatever the price was to saying something about how the Ukraine war is going badly or whatever. It was actually true statements about it. The state says that it's spreading false information. She had 7 years in jail for that? Like, what are you scared of where you have to give somebody 7 years in jail for that? Friday, November 17th, I'm Freer Than You. This artist, her name was Sasha. So somebody told me how to pronounce this and I totally butchered it, and forgive me again. Sochilinko. That's the artist who got the 7 years for the price tags. She said her last statement was, I'm freer than you. She actually is. She actually has maintained her integrity and was able to stand. And now she's got a bunch of health issues, and that could be a problem, but okay. Serious damage. Ukraine attributes destruction of Russian ships to innovative use of drones. And if you look at how many ships, it's been like 25 plus ships that the Ukrainian army has either sunk or damaged without a navy. It's absolutely amazing. Another article about defense forces gaining a foothold on the left bank of the Dnipro. There's thousands of people without power after Russian strikes on energy hubs, says Ukraine. And again, Russia keeps doing what they're doing. They keep coming in with their rockets and with the drones, and nothing has changed there. Excuse me. Doing this has really caused my voice to be hoarse. So thousands of Ukrainian children have been taken to Belarus, and I'm about to do a video about that, I think, in the next day or two. Yeah, thousands of Ukrainian children deported to Belarus, and they've deported them to Russia as well. But this is an article in the Jerusalem Post, the Moscow Times. I'm sorry. This was an article in the Jerusalem Post. It was Yale research, and yeah, apparently they got blood on their hands too, and this is a genocide, whether it is in killing or just taking children and then trying to take them away from their parents' ideology and view of the world and put them in with Russians. Moscow Times was declared a foreign agent, according to Radio Free Europe. So now they have to put, we are a foreign agent on all their publications, which actually might help them. Their independent news that was in Moscow and is now in exile. RT said that the U.S. is the biggest cause of global instability, but it pretends to be the solution. It's garden variety RT, this is the kind of thing that they say regularly. Okay, Saturday, 18 November, Ukraine notches key battlefield victory in war of attrition with Russia. Here we're talking about, again, crossing the Dnipro. The APEC summit ends with unity on the World Trade Center or Trade Organization WTO reform, but not on Gaza or Ukraine. Now, APEC, the Asian Pacific Economic Corporation or Cooperation or something along those lines, is actually supposed to be talking about trade issues. So they're not supposed to be, but talking about like political kinds of things. But there's no agreement in APEC on Gaza or Ukraine. Another article, more than 100 Russian doctors urge Putin to release a woman in prison for a price tag anti-war protest. That's going back to that lady who's I'm freer than you, changed the 5 price tags, got 7 years. She has bipolar, a heart condition, celiac disease, and I think there was something else. And like, okay, so if she dies in jail, it could be kind of a martyr moment. Now, you don't think that that's going to be a big thing, but we didn't think that the sparks that caused other like color revolutions would have been the spark, but could be. I don't know. It would be wise for Putin to give her clemency, but I don't think he's going to do that. Zelensky says that Russia may start a Balkans war in order to distract from Ukraine fighting. The more that I look at this, the more that I think about this, the more I think, I hear people say, well, we're already in World War III. I don't see a World War III kind of scenario, but I see multiple war kind of scenario popping up. And I don't know if the Balkans will be the place. One of my viewers quoted, I think it was Bismarck, who said, another blank war in the Balkans. I mean, that's where it's going to kick off. And he's right. It's a very unstable place. That's like the former Yugoslavia, that kind of neighborhood. And Serbia and Kosovo are very likely to get into it. And it wouldn't take much encouragement, I think, from Russia to cause Serbia to get going with that. Okay, this is Sunday, November 19th, a Russia war wave of drone attacks on Kyiv for a second night. It's still going. I mean, you can't forget that there's like daily destruction in Ukraine because Russia just keeps coming. Another great article, a Ukrainian general said, "We want them to be cold and hungry. Ukraine's plans to make winter intolerable for Russian invaders." So I talked about this in my three big stories, and somebody said, "Well, it's not just because of the Time magazine article that they want to keep going." No, it's not that. If I gave you that impression, it's not that. But they do need to show their Western partners that they are making progress. Congress is facing a fierce battle over Israel and Ukraine aid. This is normal politics, but it will be tricky. 60 Minutes. There's a 60 Minutes article here on CBS News that officially the Ukrainian government has documented, I'm quoting here, more than 19,000 children taken by Russia. But they told us that they worry that the actual number could be 300,000. Like, wrap that around your mind. Like, if I was missing one child, I'd be beside myself. But that's actually what's happening. This is genocide in a real political sense. Even if you're not killing them, you're trying to take them from their parents and reduce their population and add to yours. And remember, the Russians are thinking about Ukrainians as they're not really a different people. They're just Russians that just don't know any better or think that they're this and when they should be that. And then the final article that I want to talk about is the news coverage since October 7th in Israel has gone down dramatically. I talked about that last night in my three big stories. That it was 8% of CNN's news coverage. Ukraine was before October 7th, and now it's just 1%. You really need to keep this going. Spread the word. Share videos on social media. Just keep this alive because Ukraine needs help. All right. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. Thank you for the coffees. My throat needs it. And I really appreciate that you're the kind of person that cares about Ukraine. You wouldn't be here listening to me even now if you didn't really care. Thanks for caring.